It's one of the most famous scenes in the entire Bible. On the day of Jesus' trial, the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, he offers the crowd a choice. They can release the peaceful teacher, Jesus of Nazareth, or a notorious prisoner, a murderer named Barabbas. Of course, the crowd chooses Barabbas. But here's the thing. There's a tiny detail buried deep in ancient manuscripts that changes absolutely everything.
What if the choice wasn't really between Jesus and Barabbas? What if it was a choice between two men, both named Jesus? Now, that might sound like some modern revisionist theory, but it's not. Not at all.
Believe it or not, some of the earliest textual evidence we have suggests the choice was way more shocking than we remember. It wasn't a decision between a savior and a sinner, but between two men who actually shared the same name. So let's dive into what that really means. To really get what's happening in this moment, we have to start with the names. Because the names, well, they create this deliberate, high-stakes theological drama that's just incredible. First off, the name Jesus. In Hebrew, it's Yeshua. And back then, it was a super common name, kind of like John or Mike today. But its meaning is just so powerful. The Lord saves. So both men standing on that balcony probably had a name that pointed directly to salvation.
Okay, so what about Barabbas? Well, here's the kicker. That's not a first name. It's an Aramaic surname. Bar means son of, and Abba means father. You put it together, and what do you get? Son of the Father.
So just picture this. When Pilate presented the two prisoners, he was effectively asking the crowd to choose between Jesus Barabbas, that is, Jesus son of the Father, and Jesus who is called the Messiah, who of course also claimed to be the son of the Father. This wasn't just a choice between two men, it was a choice between a counterfeit and the real thing.
Now, this whole thing flips the story on its head, right? And it leaves us with two massive questions. First, why on earth did the crowd make the choice they did? And second, why is this critical detail, Barabbas' first name, missing from most of our Bibles today?
Well, it turns out the name Jesus Barabbas is right there in some of our oldest manuscripts, and because of that, most scholars believe it was original to the text. So what happened? It seems that later scribes just deliberately removed it, out of reverence. The idea that a revolutionary, a murderer, would share the sacred name of the Savior was just too scandalous, maybe even blasphemous. You even have the early church father Origen arguing that no sinner could possibly have the name Jesus, which likely gave copyists the green light to, clean up the text.
This is the real choice the crowd was facing. On one side, you've got Jesus Barabbas, the Son of the Father, and he's offering salvation through violence and insurrection, a physical, earthly kingdom. On the other side, you have Jesus of Nazareth, the divine Son of the Father, offering salvation through his own sacrifice, a heavenly kingdom. The crowd was essentially voting on which method of salvation they wanted.
But to really get why they voted the way they did, you have to put yourself in their shoes. First-century Judea was an absolute pressure cooker of Roman occupation and revolutionary fever.
The Gospels call Barabbas a leistes. Now, that's often translated as robber or bandit. But in the first century, that was a very specific Roman term for political rebels and guerrilla fighters. He wasn't just some common criminal. He was an insurrectionist, an enemy of the state.
Barabbas was almost certainly a zealot, and they were part of this radical movement whose slogan was "No king but God." For them, paying taxes to Caesar wasn't just political, it was idolatry. The most extreme zealots, known as the Sicarii or daggermen, would literally assassinate Roman officials in broad daylight. So to many people in that crowd, Barabbas wasn't a villain. He was a hero, a freedom fighter. He was doing exactly what they thought the Messiah was supposed to do.
So you had these two completely opposing philosophies of freedom on offer. The zealot way, the one Barabbas represented, defined the enemy as Rome. The weapon was the sword, and the goal was political freedom. But Christ's way? It redefined everything. The true enemy wasn't Rome. It was sin and death. His weapon wasn't a sword. It was sacrifice. And the goal wasn't just national freedom. It was spiritual reconciliation with God. The crowd chose the immediate, tangible solution to their political problems.
But there's another layer to this story, a deep, ancient parallel that turns this historical event into something else entirely, a living parable. You see, the scene in Pilate's courtyard is a shocking reenactment of the Jewish Day of Atonement.
So in the ancient ritual of Yom Kippur, two identical goats were brought before the high priest. One was sacrificed, a payment for sin. The other, the scapegoat, had all the sins of Israel confessed over it and was then set free into the wilderness, symbolically carrying those sins far, far away. One for payment, one for removal.
Okay, now look at the trial through that lens. Two men named the Lord Saves are standing before the people. In a stunning reversal of the ritual, the crowd chooses the guilty one, Barabbas, to be their scapegoat. He's released, carrying their desire for rebellion away with him. And the innocent one, Christ, becomes the sacrifice. The guilty man walks free precisely because the innocent man takes his place.
So what does this all mean? When you put the history, the text, and the theology together, the story of Barabbas isn't just a side plot. It becomes a mirror, reflecting the absolute core message of the Christian faith.
And here's the crucial point. Jesus Barabbas, the murderer and revolutionary, becomes the very first person to experience the gospel in its most literal, raw form. He was guilty. He was scheduled for execution. And yet, he just walked free, because the Son of God took his cross instead.
The story forces us to this really startling conclusion. Barabbas isn't just some side character in the Passion story. In this living parable, Barabbas is us. We are the ones who are guilty, the ones deserving of punishment, who are set free because an innocent substitute stood in our place. In the end, Pilate presented a choice between two Jesuses, two sons of the Father, two completely different versions of salvation. One offered a political fix with a sword, the other offered a spiritual cure with the cross. The crowd in Jerusalem made their choice, and the question this story leaves for all of us is, which one do we choose today?